So welcome to Putting Your Values on the Plate, which is our final session of today's Arrell Food Summit. My name is Jess, Haines, and I'm a professor of applied nutrition here at the University of Guelph. And I have the distinct pleasure of hosting the terrific Joshna Maharaj. Joshna is a chef, an author, and a leading food activist in Canada. She has been described as the chef without a kitchen. And this is because she is too busy. Working in various institutional settings to revolutionize the food they provide. She is also the chef expert on CBC Radio's Kitchen Help Desk, you might have heard her there. She's also won many awards for her work. She has been nominated for the Basque Culinary World Prize, and this honors chefs whose work has a wider socioeconomic benefit for society. She was the 2018 recipient of Restaurant Canada's Culinary Excellence Award, and she also won the World Gourmand Cookbook Award for her 2020 book, Take Back the Tray, revolutionizing food in hospitals, schools, and other institutions. Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for that very nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, it's fabulous to have you.
It's lovely, lovely to be here.
So we are joining you today from the newly opened Anita Stewart Memorial Food Lab here at the University of Guelph. Like you, Joshna, Anita was a champion of local Canadian food and a tireless food advocate. She was. She also was a great friend at the University of Guelph and the Arrell Food Institute. She also had an amazing ability to connect and support people who value food. We've heard so many stories from people from across Canada about how Anita left them with a key connection or piece of advice that stayed with them. Joshna, do you have a story about her?
I do. It's so nice to hear that she intentionally was planting seeds in all of us.
Isn't it true?
Right?
I know.
It's so sweet. We'd have never known, I think, otherwise. But I remember when I was really young, as a young chef, I was working at the Stop, which is a community food center in the West End of Toronto, and I was at a food event, but I was serving things that had come out of our garden, so it was like garlic scape pesto, and I made a little bit of cornbread for it. It was a very humble thing from our very grassroots kitchen, but it really stood out with all the starch linen and the everything, the tartare and everything else that was happening. And so Anita came by, and she tasted my thing, and then remember she stood back and looked at the table, and then looked at me, and she came around the corner, and she was like, "You don't worry about these guys, just keep doing what you're doing." And that young version of me was like, "Thank you very much." Thank you. I really, as I was tidying up, I remember being like, okay, I feel really weird, I feel really out of place, but she gets it, right? She got it, she understood what I was trying to do, and that meant a whole lot.
Well, and you did stay with it, which is
I really did.
Right?
I took her advice. I really did. And every time I see her after that, she's always like, just stay cool here. You're doing just fine. Yeah.
I love it. So as you get going, I'm going to just ask you a few questions. I would love to know how your passion for food started.
Oh, that's a nice one. Okay, let's talk about that while I deal with this beautiful squash.
Perfect.
So let me just tell you a little bit about this, and then we'll start talking me and food and passion.
Perfect.
So, hello everybody. We are going to make butternut squash tacos today, which is really one of my most delicious things to do. And we'll talk about kind of all of the values and why we made these decisions in a moment, but we gotta get this squash in the oven. So, here's what we do. This is a bit unruly and wild, but this is the time of year for this. So the best way to deal with these guys, first, is to cut, I like to say, north and south off. Alright, you cut the bottom and the top off, and that at least can give you something steadier to work with. You have a couple of options. You can hold the squash like this and do this kind of shimmy down scenario with a knife, but I find that can be dangerous and cumbersome. So I lay it down and I use my very favorite U-shaped peeler and just go for it. You'll go through it more times, but it's a lot safer, and now I can chat with you about stuff while we peel. So let's do it.
Yes, so I was going to start at the beginning, which is where did your passion for food come from?
So whenever I get asked this question, I always say that being the oldest female child in an Indian family, there was no way I was escaping the kitchen. Right? To just cut onions or get stuff from my mom and my aunties, there was no way I was getting away from any of that. And so I just was sort of thrust into that. But really the magic of it came when I actually lived in India for a year. I went after university, full of lots of conviction that I didn't need to learn anymore. Right? And I had, yeah, 100%. And like, you should know that I have a degree in religious studies and women's studies. So hilarious when I thought I knew, right? But I made a deal with my parents that if they were cool with me taking a year to kind of just hang out and eat mangoes and figure myself out, that I would come home with a plan for the rest of my life. Thankfully they were into it, and they said, cool. And so I was living in India, and I was cooking I was in a very like humble ashram, which is sort of like a Hindu equivalent of a monastery, and they roped me into the kitchen. They saw that I was sort of doing nothing as far as they were concerned, and they were very good. They were worried about who my insane parents were. It's just like, no husband, just off in the world. Like, let's save this for, from spinsterhood, let's save her. So they dragged me into the kitchen and started teaching me how to make simple things like chapatis and, easy dal and that sort of stuff. But in the process, I fell in love. I was like, wait a minute, you can do this. You can do this for a dog. This could be my dog, right? And so I sent a proclamation home to my parents about the fact that my destiny was to be a chef. They were not that excited about that at all. They were like, yeah, sure. We need something a little more substantial than that. But the biggest piece is that while I was there in that very sort of different context, even just this beautiful room here, I really got a sense of the power and the responsibility of a chef. Right? And to me, that was about my intentions, my mental state, and the fact that that imbues directly into the food that I cook. Right? And that to me was a huge one, because I saw it happen on both ways. I saw the crankiness get delivered out to people, one ladle at a time, right? And the wave of crankiness wash over the whole dining hall. But then I also saw the humor when the cook's girlfriend would visit, and he had a little spring in his step, and he was happier, we were singing, the food tasted better, everybody sort of left happier. I thought, oh, from one pot, all those people, that, the excitement of that makes my heart race. And that's why I was like, okay, I think this is my job. This is the job for me.
Well, and it fits so well, right? Because we're talking today about values and putting them into your plate, right? And you learned early that actually you saw it happen.
It's the hugest one, right? It's exactly the reason why food made by a machine is less exciting, because you don't have any opportunity to intersect and put any of your good intentions in that. And that to me feels like a real problem. Right.
So in thinking, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, this is my name also. You will break out into a bit of a sweat, maybe you can reassign this to somebody else in your kitchen. So it does work, yes.
Yes, you're doing a great job. So thinking about the values and transferring to the plate, and you articulate this well in your book, but for folks who haven't read it, what are your values?
So there's a few of them. I like to narrow it down to wholesome, affordable, delicious. But wholesome is a big bracket, right? Because I really want food that was grown with some care and attention in a way that respects the earth and the soil. I want it to be as full of nutrients and flavor as possible.
Yes.
But then I also want it to be made and cooked with care and attention. And ideally, some familiarity from a cultural perspective to whoever's eating it, or otherwise, right? But it also, it really has to nourish. Good food has got, the point of food is to nourish people. And if we keep serving people, particularly people in public institutions, empty food, no one is going to learn or grow or, develop. Just going to raise some hands. No one is going to do that well. And that's really the problem that I've identified here.
Yes.
Or at least the one I want to tackle, let's say.
That's right. So,
Thank you. Okay.
Alright. So you touched on thinking about values is really interesting, and how do we get, as you said, a machine can't do it, right? So many of our institutions aren't reflecting those values.
Not at all, right? And the thing that I say is that it's not to say they're not reflecting any values, it's just the wrong ones, right? Because the values that are being reflected are things like corporate relationships, brand loyalty, and budgetary constraints. Right? Those values are loud and clear in all the cafes.
That's right.
And in fact, we brought a little sample here of some of the sort of sadder looking options that are available for lunches. right? Important things to know. Curiously non-perishable,
Yes.
not that much flavor, little to no nutritional value, but they can be shipped around anywhere, right?
Right.
These baby can go wherever you need them to go, airplane, whatever, right? And that's the curious piece. But again, the biggest information you have here are about the corporate brands and the people that put that together, and not anything about how that bun was made, where that meat came from, the poor mangoes that were squeezed into who knows what their life was, right?
Right.
It's not telling us any stories. And as we move, as time passes, as climate change becomes the thing that it is, as our children's health is sort of reflecting these problems in their diets, we have to start making different decisions,
Yes.
right? We really do have to change our approach. Let me just show you how to get into this squash.
Perfect.
Now that it's all peeled and beautiful and you've wiped the sweat from your brow after all that work, the bulby bottom part is where all the seeds are, right? So we want to kind of get to that as easily as possible. But again, please be careful because you can really hurt yourself with a slit knife. So in half and then in half again. Aha! And then we reveal all this beautiful stuff. So you can totally save these seeds and toast them, or do some lovely other kind of bit of maple syrup and something. It's a great project to give to your kiddos to actually separate the seeds from the little pods. That'll keep them occupied for a while.
For hours.
And it's like sufficiently slimy, so they'll be
Yes,
too, right? So I'm just scraping the seed bits out. And you see what I love about this is that it's a nice solid piece that I can cut the way I want.
Right.
Right? We're not so tied to the curves of the squash that you can be sometimes. All right, come on, baby. Okay, perfect. So now, because we're gonna have tacos, we wanna sort of cut this little squash into longish strips. So we may not even use all of this, but let's see how far we get. And when you're doing something like this, the key piece is to just make sure that they're all the same size so that they roast evenly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm cutting sort of like long fingers here, and these will lay down really nicely in the tortilla. To be honest, it's also a great foundation for like a warm winter salad or something nice like that. All right. Yeah, I think that's it. I think for our purposes, I'm just going to roast half of this because there's plenty here.
Yes.
And this can be saved for soup, salads, muffins, quick breads, any kind of thing like that. So I'm going to ask you to pass me the large bowl.
You bet.
So we want to flavor these up, and we're going to use some beautiful Mexican flavors. I actually had some of the most delicious squash tacos ever on a trip to Mexico City. And I was like, oh, you guys really deal with the vegetables beautifully. So I'm going to drizzle a bit of vegetable oil over, just a bit so that it coats it and everything gets a bit shiny. And then we have chili powder, cumin, a bit of, that's a lot of cayenne, and we won't put all that cayenne in. That'll be a little intense. But the chili powder and the cumin, for sure. And then I'm going to do myself a favor and not put my finger in there.
Yes.
Okay, right? I'm notoriously famous for that nonsense. And then we'll season with a bit of salt. And hands. Hands are the best tool. Just get in there and make sure that everybody gets some of that spicy action.
And so often institutions, right, you're cooking for a large group of
Yes.
people. Do you ever worry about spices, how much you put in, that sort of thing, or how do you?
Yeah, well, I find this a really interesting conundrum because on one hand, in a hospital, you can understand why people wouldn't want necessarily very intensely flavored food, right? If you're not well and you're healing,
Yes.
let's have things be gentle. But at the same time, it's not even hospitals in India also serve gentle food, right? There's this little dal and rice thing that they serve, but sometimes comfort food for people is really spicy food.
Right. Yep.
Right? And if we're thinking about a scenario where we just want to get something into people's bodies after or before surgery or something like that, let's maybe just have more of a conversation about it.
Yes.
Right? And have options and don't assume that the mild spice-free version is the only one we want.
Totally.
Right?
And I do lots of work with kids, and kids, that's an assumption that happens all the time too. Like, what's kid-friendly food? And
Right.
it's usually very bland, processed, highly processed.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't understand it.
No, no, yeah,
Right, I see people come to my stations at food events,
yes,
right, and the kids will be so curious
yes.
about what's on there. Well, and they want to taste, but the parent will be like,
You're not
too
gonna like,
spicy.
yeah,
It's too
yeah.
spicy. And I was like, what do you think kids in India eat? Kids in Thailand, what do you think they're eating? Right? And like, let the kid burn and learn the thing, right?
That's right, that's right.
Okay, so these we have the preheated oven at 400 degrees.
Okay,
They're gonna go in 20-25 minutes
right,
until they're slightly brown and tender.
wonderful.
Off you go, sweet things. And again, in a context where you are large quantitying this,
Mhm.
perhaps the peel and the chop down is a bit labor intensive.
Right,
So then you hack a little squash in half, you scoop up the seeds, and you roast it, and then just put that soft flesh inside the tacos.
absolutely.
Right? Nice
Yes.
and simple, and then you can do it for 200 people at a time.
Yes, 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 yes.
We can be a bit precious here because it's just you and me.
That's right.
Okay. Alright, so now we have a bit of time to chat.
All right.
Squash is in.
Squash is in. We're gonna remove the not.
Yes, thank you very much. We have seen you, we hear you, we see you. We apologize to you for that. When I'm traveling and I'm on a plane and I get served one of those,
Yes.
I always look at it for a while. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. What you've been through. Right? I'm so sorry.
I thought you meant you apologize to the staff and handed it back.
No,
You actually
no,
apologize
no,
to the food.
itself.
I'm sorry for you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you have done a lot of work in various hospitals as
Mhm.
well as university settings. And we just talked a little bit about schools. Are there other institutions that you are eager to think about or you think we should be thinking about? Where else should we be?
Yes, yes. Two places, prisons and government.
Oh, tell me more.
Right?
Tell me more. Yeah.
Prisons I feel is like the third chunk
Uh-huh.
in this. It's like health, hospitals, health and wellness, education, rehabilitation.
Right.
Right? What I really want to advocate for is that we rethink our relationship to all three and how we use food in those three contexts. Right? Because the prisons, I find it so much more interesting because it's the only it's a very unique context.
Yeah.
First, the food is kind of part of the punishment.
Mm.
Right? Which then opens up what I think is a really important conversation about whether a prisoner surrenders their human rights or not, and who gets to make that decision. I don't believe that they do. I feel that they're all still humans with those rights intact inside of those prisons, and that as a result they should be served more dignified food in a dignified way.
Right.
But they're also in prisons, the labor is the end user. Right? Whereas in hospitals and schools, there's a distinct separation, which is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Is that there's no sense when you're in your bed upstairs in a hospital that there's somebody downstairs or a kid, there's no connection to the humanity or the people. But in prisons it is.
Right.
And that feels exciting for me for what you could do, right? And what food skills could do to support somebody to rebuild their lives and get back out there again, right? That's a
Absolutely.
key piece, I think.
Well, and I think the rehabilitation part's really interesting, right? Like, it's actually not that different than we're thinking about, growing young children in
No.
schools, making people
That's
healthy
exactly.
in the hospital,
That's
and
exactly.
rehab at the.
And listen, I just spoke to a woman doing incredible work with juvenile offenders in Ireland.
Mm.
Right? And she said she was brought in to teach them cooking skills, not just so much as the food service, but she said by virtue of their incarceration and the food service was the first time many of these young offenders had eaten 3 meals a day. Right? And the fact that it just kept coming. The 3 meal, right? They're not used to that. In their homes, and either was controlled or forbidden or not available, right? And I don't want to go too far in making connections about what motivates people's behavior, but this is not nothing.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Vast populations of people living with food insecurity, and then such huge populations of young people finding themselves in correctional facilities, it's not nothing, right? The food is no longer a child's primary source. The home is no longer a child's primary source of nutrition.
That's right.
If you really think about that is like you need to find a lot. Story, right?
Absolutely.
To really consider that schools are doing this job, early daycare, childcare programs are doing this job, and then to see in the pandemic, the fact that the thing that kids were missing from school was more than the education,
Yes.
right? It was
Absolutely.
the meal, the fact that the meal was being missed, it just showed us a lot about what's happening. I gave you a
Yes.
very long answer to that question.
No,
But that, like, this is, we need a lot of change here, let's say that.
we need a lot of change. The other interesting thing, of course, is just now we recognize that once we actually figure out how to revolutionize it in one setting, those learnings are very similar across the way,
Yes.
right? That
Yes,
there's,
the actual lessons are the same.
yes,
We have to massage them for the context, but
yes,
you're totally right.
yes,
Because there is a certain objective thing about the way this works and what
yes,
happens here,
yes.
right? This is, the greatness of the kitchen is that it can be an equalizer at a level like that, right? And the best version of kitchens is that everybody with the white jacket has, the hierarchy is, you know what I mean? We're all sort of
Yes.
working together for the same goal, doing a thing, and I think that spirit really helps people grow.
Do you need to keep prepping?
We're gonna do this, yes, now, thank you. You saw that look in my
I
eyes.
was like, you look like you're moving.
Yes. So the next thing we're gonna do is just do a really simple, fresh salsa, right? We have some of the last of our tomatoes here in the season, and I love this version because usually you make a salsa, it's all this fine chopping.
Right.
Which is lovely, but we all know no institutional cook has that kind of time,
Okay.
right? So there's a beautiful little food processor hack that we're gonna do that's really nice and simple. So, we have Roma tomatoes, and I'm just literally gonna chop off the top end here
Alright,
and cut these beauties sort of into quarters. We don't need to go that far.
alright.
And this, essentially what we're making here is a pico de gallo, which is
Right.
right? It's the thing that's like on the table in Mexican restaurants, very ubiquitous, because it's probably one of the easiest things to make.
Right.
Alright, so all these beauties will go in. And then we're gonna take a bit of onion. I like the red onion, it's got a bit of a different flavor,
Right.
but really, don't let this stop you.
Neither would work.
Don't let it stop you from making the salsa. Either a white onion will be just fine, scallions also could work in a pinch, for sure.
Okay.
Right, and again, just a rough chop, so they're all same-ish size in there. I think maybe I was a bit stinged on the end. Okay. There we go. And then jalapeno for sure. This is to your taste, and a lot of folks, let's get this schmutz out of the way, a lot of folks want to tame down the heat.
Okay.
So they will pull the seeds out, because all the fire inside of jalapeno is right here in the center of the seeds. You can easily do that, you kind of just do a little slice in, and this whole thing comes right out, so you have minimal finger involvement, or you could just let it go and put it all in. So we're going to do both,
Okay.
because I like the heat,
Right.
and we are going to add a bit of lime juice. And I like to do this, just give it a little roll. That helps to kind of like just get all the juices flowing on the inside there.
So then you're squeezing it a little easier.
That's it.
Nice.
And again, this poor citrus fruit made a journey to get here.
Right.
So let's use all of it that we possibly can and maximize that. Okay. All right. Now we actually have a bit of a gift here, my dear, in that
Oh, I
we
recognize that.
brought this beautiful Cannon Fire. Grassroots made on campus here at University of Guelph. Woo!
Invented and made.
Thank you very much. We're going to put a little hit of that in there too. Oh, I don't know how hot this is. Oh, that's delicious. Oh, that's good. Okay, so a little bit of salt, and then I'm going to do just one round of oil. Oh, and of course I see it here. Cilantro. No salsa is anything without cilantro, and literally this can just go right inside.
Perfect.
That is the magical food processor. So on goes the lid, and off we go. And you just keep your eye on it. I actually think the pulse option is better so that it doesn't get too pureed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Want a little bit of chunk in there still. Well, that's it. Well, I mean, that's the chunk. I feel like any Mexican people watching will say, no, can't go far enough. Can't go far enough. fresh,
Oh,
lovely thing. Let's give it a little taste. Mmm. I love it. It's like, it is such a difference to make yourself a fresh salsa.
Oh, so true.
Right? It
Yes.
is such a difference on everything. Everything is so much more delicious. And look, I grew up on bottled salsa before I became a cook. You know, as a kid, I was very happy with all of it. But this is a little extra magic.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And took a minute. There was a second.
It was so quick.
Yeah.
So quick.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. We're getting really close. Now we have time to actually hang out and have a little chat while the squash is doing its thing.
Love it. So I'm thinking about school and
Yes.
school nutrition. And you talked a little bit about it when you talked about the children or the youth in Ireland who were able to learn some food skills. When we think about what a school food could look like, what is your vision? What would you like to see?
I mean, for me, it's gotta be beyond the plates.
Okay.
Is the thing, right? That's the best way I think to describe it is that it has to be the entire culture of food that exists in a school.
Right. Yes.
And that's I think largely why a lot of these kind of fledgling initiatives that we see don't stick.
Mm-hmm.
Because the support systems in the school don't exist to actually nurture a food program. Right?
Okay.
The attitude of the culture in the school exists to order things in.
Yes.
And keep it nice and tidy and lowest effort possible.
Yes.
Right? We all want the food to be lowest effort possible, which is kind of part of the problem.
Right.
Because our food should taste like this.
That's right.
Right? And we should be more involved in our food and our eating. So we want to see things like, I remember suggesting ideas to administrations that there is a protected lunch hour.
Right.
You know what I mean? That 12 to 1, no classes.
Yes.
And then everything stops so that we can take a moment and have lunch.
Oh, for sure. I always say, I'm not sure what we're trying to train kids to do because we've trained them to eat at their desk.
Yes.
Right? So what kind
It's
of...
what kind of adults and work scenarios are
Yeah.
going to happen, right?
Yes.
As we all now learn to slow down and do less and, think about our post-pandemic selves. It's crazy.
Yes, yet they spent 12 years sitting at a desk, often eating.
Right?
Yes.
And the other beautiful opportunity is to think about the number of ways that food and food education can be embedded into the curriculum.
Right.
That's my dream. That's really,
Is it
it's not
universal? It's not...
That's Alice Water, that's not me, but
Yeah.
Everybody should learn these skills, right? We literally, in the Toronto District School Board, there's history of the home ec, the kitchens all pushed to the side to the computer labs. Right? In the 90s-ish, they all had this idea that those were the skills that our kids were going to need.
Yes.
When you tell me a kid who is not technologically proficient,
Oh,
by virtue of their own instinct.
By being
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The 2-year-olds who are disarming the family alarm system, that is not, the food is really what we need to teach them. And so I want to see school spaces that make those connections with food and that take time. Like you see images and stories of lunchtime in a French classroom where the lunch is actually a class.
Yes.
And the teacher sits with the students. And they learn how to eat, table manners, they learn how to pass food around and share.
Yes. And they're at a table, not a desk, and it's, with a tablecloth. Yes. And I once chatted to a woman in the media who was asking about food literacy.
Yeah.
And she reflected back to me, she goes, actually, now that I think about it, my mom always had her home ec book, right? That she referred back to, her mom, she remembered watching her.
No.
And I said, and I bet you never saw her pick up her calculus book. It is that fundamental skill that we somehow, yes. And in your book, you talk about the fact that it's not just about the tray, and we have to be the values of the institution from day one. How do we get there?
Okay, so one is asserting those values in the first place.
Okay.
Right? A lot of the places that I work in, I realize that because, nobody really anticipated the degree to which the industrial food system was going to have its way with our food and with us, and and the climate change, we didn't, sadly, foresee this. Right? We didn't know it was coming, so we didn't plan for it, we didn't make any adjustments for it. Right? But now what we need to see is we need to articulate these things. It's now important. Similarly to what we're seeing around making an anti-racist statement or thinking about anti-racism and anti-oppression, it's one thing to say, we're not racist as opposed to actually taking an anti-racist position,
That's right.
right? And embedding anti-racist ideas. This is about embedding good food values, right? It's not just to say, we like local food, we like lunchtime. No, what is your skin in the game here?
Yeah.
How have you decided to serve meals in your institution? Where are you buying them from? How are they being cooked? Because that's all the pieces, right?
Yeah.
You want to switch the values from being less about talking about corporate relationships, and I mean, if I dare suggest, more about like, these are Mark's green beans, right?
Yes.
And our friend Tori grew those apples, right?
Yes.
I'm much more interested in our kids having those connections
Yes.
than recognizing all the catalog of Frito-Lay.
Yeah. So it's like conversation at the beginning, and you explicitly state what your values are.
Yes.
Yes. As an institution.
100%, and you say this is what we believe.
Yes.
And it doesn't, when I work with institutions, I think this stage really gets people a bit crazy. Because they're like, there's so much. I can't do all of this, right? Because then it's like, it needs to be locally sourced, it needs to be organically grown. Now we need to think of regenerative, right? It needs to be simple, it needs to be less ingredients, it needs to be culturally appropriate. And like, right at the end of it, you're like, I don't know what we're gonna give you, right?
So how do you help them? What do you do?
So, I talk about the fact that you do one or two things,
Nice.
and you get started. The key piece here is, like, remember, we're not gonna make the leap that we need to make in one step.
Right.
It's too much, right? In hospitals and in schools, I was going from convincing them about scratch cooking in the first place.
Yes.
Right? So when I moved from the machine-made to handmade food, I cannot start talking about naturally raised meat.
Right. Meat source, you
You
gotta
know what I mean? I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
Right? I have to be like, let's just talk about chopping an onion and making an omelet or a frittata or so, you know, whatever that is. And so the way I see it, this has got to be a broader continuum. And what my work is to lure people in, to let them know that it's exciting and doable, and then to get everybody's feet pointed in the same direction, so that we can move together, right?
Yes.
That's really got to be it, because we need multiple points of intersection, right? Just like with cooking, we have to meet people where they are. And we're not going to get people who are really happy with the comfort of placing one order and having a shrink wrapped skin show up the next day, right? Those people are into that system, right? They dig it.
Yeah.
So let's hold their hands, right? And we have to walk through with a bit of compassion and kindness with that. But it's just, we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I see people terrified, but then they're paralyzed by that fear. And nothing gets done.
Right.
And we keep ordering Cisco. No slight to Cisco, thank you, Cisco. No slight to Cisco. But maybe you're not the ones to feed your children. So there are ways to get in, there are ways to jump in, there are ways to get involved. Even if it is, our mission is to put whole good local apples on this tray for, right? That's a great place to start.
Yes, I love it. And it also, it's hopeful and also speaks to the need to be patient, but move people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you that is amazing is that what people don't realize is that there's joy and pleasure.
Tell me more.
Right? Because when they taste...
That seems like something that you can sell. Joy and pleasure.
Yes! Right? When they taste food, when I'm like, this is how I like to make these muffins, they're like, these are delicious. I'm like, yeah, who said that was off the table? Right? I firmly believe that food has got to be healthy and wholesome, but part of that is joy. Right? And
nourished.
It's got to be pleasurable to eat. That's the whole point.
Yes.
Right? To keep us alive and keep us going back for more.
Yes.
Right? I had a dietitian pal in my research who told me so smartly, food is only healthy if it's eaten.
100%.
Which I love, right? Because you see it, I'm sure in your work, you see how we can spin around and get so caught up in our ideas about how many brands of this, or you know what I mean, or that.
Yeah.
A little bit more. But then you put it down in front of somebody with a bunch of tubes or someone who just finished class, and they're like,
That's right.
It's not that delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our line too. We work with food waste, and lots of it gets thrown out as fruits and vegetables. And that's our line, fruit and vegetables only healthy for you. You have to figure out.
That's the key.
It needs to be pleasurable. It needs to be used. Yeah, absolutely. So, do you need me to start with some?
So let's do that. Let's give another couple of minutes.
Okay.
But we're gonna start assembling these tacos. So we've got a simple little warm corn tortillas here. And now is the time where we're going to reveal the fact that we actually have a little Three Sisters story happening here.
Oh.
Which is very exciting. So
It
Three
is.
Sisters is a story that comes from Indigenous culture, and it's connection to actually how things grow in the land, and that these three plants, corn, bean, and squash, grow together and take care of each other. Right? It's about sturdiness from corn stalks, shade from squash leaves, and then the nutrients from the beans, you know what I mean, into the soil. So now I was just thinking about the values that are on this plate. Right? So maybe we'll break this down. We have homemade things, so there's a scratch-made component. These are seasonal and local, so we're really connecting to the land around us. But then we perhaps have a bit of a deeper connection with an Indigenous story, right? And I am on a bit of a tear right now to encourage people to think about the fact that there's like a 2.0 on our local food understanding. One, we already got the local food, amazing, but the truth is, local food actually is Indigenous food. Right? And we need to think a bit deeper about what it means to take things from this land. Right? We talk about the work we've done to put in this to get back out again. But let's broaden our thinking and stretch that a little bit more to understand that this land that we are guests on is offering food up. And I think that there's room for acknowledgement and more gratitude that way, right? I think it makes me feel better to be anchored to the land this way.
I love it. I love it. Local food 2.0. I love
Yes.
it. And I'm going to take here.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yes.
We're gonna hide and sweaty in the kitchen. Okay, so the other values we're talking about are care and attention, right? And about agricultural economies and buying things and shortening the loop between producer and consumer, because we bought these at the farmer's market, and those like that, especially here, right? I joined the purchaser here at the auction.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
I had to sit on my hands and I just start bidding on skids of straw. I was like, what? Put your hand, do not. You have like Honda Fit. You're not gonna fit at all. So let's turn this on, and we're just gonna toast up these tortillas. We'll let these beautiful things cool, and just for the sake of seeing what's happening here, the tortillas. And we have these beautiful bits of squash, and they're really nice and tender. You can see, and they're full, and they smell all rich and coated in that beautiful spice mixture.
Yes.
So here, these essentially are lovely little taco fillings. So these tortillas, you can see, as they sort of sit, they get a bit thick and stodgy, so we just warm them up in a dry pan.
All right.
Sometimes a little spritz of water can help, but let's see how you do there.
And so what's going to happen? It's going to get
It's literally just going to soften up.
Okay.
So that it's nice and pliable.
Okay.
And so, for service, we've got our beautiful squash. I've got some feta cheese, which is lovely. Just do a little crumble up.
I will
This is the
absolutely
finish thing. I'm very happy. Just go for it.
We're good. Excellent.
And we have refried beans. And so, this is from a sort of balanced meal perspective. We have the veg of the squash. We have a real good protein source here with our refried beans.
Absolutely.
We're going to get a bit of dairy, lots of nice veg from the salsa, and then I've just done some blanched green beans for the side.
Oh,
Right? And then we'll bring our tray up and put that all together.
correct.
All right. So obviously, I think that we're imagining a school lunch tray here.
Exactly. Oh, thanks, ma'am.
We're imagining a school lunch tray. And so this is about putting the best thing we can in front of kids
Yes.
at convenient times, right? It's bright, it's colorful, hopefully it's enticing.
Yes.
It'll fill them up, right? It's not just going to be about, the peaks and valleys that a lot of the packaged food really is. And hopefully it can expose them to different flavors, right? There's a little heat here.
Yes.
It's a little buzz on the tongue, nothing too wild. Although the hot sauce in that salsa might exactly do that trick. So can I ask you to bring that tray over?
Absolutely.
We'll relocate this. Alright, so we have our beautiful tortillas. Woo! Nice and soft. And here's this fun little trick to set them up.
They hold each other up.
That's exactly it. Oh.
See,
More values on the plate. Okay, so now we had a pair of tongs. I'll just put 2, I think, of these little beauties inside. And then if you would, give us here, let's do a little hit. So 2 little dollops of fried beans, and I'll come in with salsa.
That's gorgeous.
And we know, I mean, when there's more time, letting kiddos have at it and assemble their own tacos is always a nice, joyful thing here.
Well, and it speaks to your universal vision, right? A comprehensive program would have kids making this happen, right?
And cooking for each other.
Yes.
And yet there's a hospitality piece in there that I really like them learning about. And sharing food is an important thing. One of the things that the eating at our desks really gives us is this, like, this is my food only for me.
Yes.
Right? When maybe the breaking bread is not all about, you know?
Yes.
So you can, queso fresco is a beautiful, fresh Mexican cheese. Not always easy to get your hands on, but I'll tell you, feta does a great pinch in. And then I won't be able to resist. This is the brown grill inside me. That has to have a little bit of fresh coriander on everything that goes out. And then if you would just tuck some beans in the side there for us, I think we have our lovely plate.
We have revolutionized this tray.
Okay, that's lovely.
Alright.
So here we are. Wait, one more important thing. Instead of a juice box or a carton of milk, sometimes milk is appropriate. Let's get our kids excited about drinking water. Okay, here. Let's really pay some nice attention to that beautiful thing. So now, this is the Joshna Dream Lunch tray. We have bright, crunchy things. We have vegetables. I think meat is, I'm an omnivore myself, but we need to eat less of it, and we need to eat better sources of it, right? So if you can't afford really good sources, play some games with vegetables. So squash tacos, green beans, we have an oatmeal chocolate chip cookie, a beautiful local apple, and a glass of water. And that is, to me, this lunch talks about community and caring and connections, right? Outside, it talks about intentions to the person who's receiving it.
Yes.
Right? And that this is something we chose to offer you as opposed to, we have to do this, so here's what we do.
You have put your values on the plate. I'm going to ask one more thing about
Yes.
one of the things I loved in your book is that at the end of the few recipes you have a call to action. So you don't just get to make this great food, you have to do something. So can you give us a call to action at the now?
I love it. So we really need to start talking to government. I really believe I was yelling and screaming as much as I could during that last election because food is something that matters to all 37 million of us who live here, but it is conspicuously out of the mouths of our leaders. And that is a real problem. That they don't get it is a real problem. So our job as concerned people, as cooks, as academics, advocates, teachers, all of this, we need to start making lots of noise so the government understands that this is important to us. Right?
Yes.
Or whether they decide to change, next step. And I'm ready to jump in as soon as they are. But we really need to send a message that they need to open their minds and have food be much more a part of their platforms than they are right now. So local governments, local, provincial, for like all levels, they need to hear it. So let everybody know what you think and what you want.
Well, and it fits perfectly with the Arrell Food Institute theme, which is putting our values into action. So we need to put those into action. Thank you so much. This was a joy and a pleasure, and it was so inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you're trying to find Joshna and you want more Joshna, right? You can follow her on social media. She's at Joshna Maharaj. She also has a podcast, Hot Plate. And of course, pick up her amazing book at your local bookseller.
And there's an audiobook version, which I read.
Do you read it?
Yes.